Hello, yeah, welcome to TF Designs. I'm TIA, and today I'm going to be showing you how to draft, how to cut and sew this beautiful office gown. So now this style is in three parts. We have the skirt block, we have the bodice, the front and the back, and we also have the sleeve block. So I'm going to be showing you how to cut this easily. So I'm going to be making use of this textured fabric for my details for the curve and also for the overlap on the neckline. I have my zipper, and I also have this gray stylish stretchy crepe fabric. It's a bit thick, not light at all. So now I'm going to be making use of these patterns. I'm going to be dropping the link to how you can draft these patterns in my description box. I have my sleeve block, I have my skirt block, both the front and the back. I also have my front and my back patterns. You are going to be needing this in order to be able to draft or cut this gown properly. Also have an extra pattern paper for my front block. Okay, so now what I'm going to do now is to place my skirt block, which is for the back, on my fabric. Now I folded this fabric just into two, so now I'm trying to pin down my skirt block to this particular fabric so that I'll be able to cut out my skirt parts properly. So I'm just pinning this because I'm actually filming outside, and yeah, it can get windy at times. So now I'm just determining the length I want. Initially I had to mark 21 inches down. I was thinking this was what I'm going to use, but then checking the style again, I discover I think I want my gown to go beneath my nails a bit. Why? Because I'm going to be wearing heels on this, so I decided to go with 24 inches, as you can see. And after marking that, I think I was happy with the result. I just went on to mark this properly. Now the next thing you're going to do is to add 1 inch to be able to fold this part when you are done sewing. So this is just for my folding. This is like folding allowance. I just added 1 inch to be able to fold this part after I'm done joining. All right, so at this point I also went on to connect that zipper line straight to the end of my skirt, also the side seam to the end of my skirt. As you can see, I did the same for the original line and also for the seam allowance line. And when I'm done with this, satisfied with the result, I just went back to highlight every other part so that I'm going to be able to cut properly and accurately. So after doing this now, as you can see, I'm going to be going in with my scissors to cut out on this lined area. I just cut out this lined area, or this marked area rather. So the excesses, remember the curve we have towards the bum region, make sure this is there because it's going to help your outfit look more beautiful. So now I'm just going to indicate my hip point, my original hip point, with my tailor's chalk, and I had to remove the pin at this point because I'm going to be making this into a pencil skirt. I want it to be a pencil gown. So after indicating that hip point for my original line, not the seam allowance line, um going to be creating out a pencil curve. So on my hip I have 9 inches, and going down toward the length, as you can see, I'm going to be taking 7 inches instead of that 9 inches that made this pattern a straight skirt initially. So that means I took away 2 inches. You could actually decide to do 1.5, but I just love my outfit being, if it's pencil, it should be really pencil. Of course I'm young. Okay, so after that I just connected from my hip down to that 7-inch mark I took. So as you can see, I've been able to create that pencil curve, and here I'm just adding 1 inch seam allowance just to be able to, sewing allowance rather. So from that other point I marked down my sewing allowance of 1 inch. So now at this point I'm just going to cut out the extras I don't need again. Yeah, so as you can see, I also went on to mark my darts. I mark my darts legs, then my dart points, so that I'll be able to take in my dart effectively. And after doing that, I just went on to remove the pins, and here is it. My two piece for the back pattern is ready. Now for the front pattern, as you can see where the center front is whole is written, I'm going to be placing this on a folded fabric. I folded my fabric into two just like the back pattern, and the first thing I did was to go to the upper part and add the 0.5 inches. Now, what I did for the front, for the back pattern is also what I'm going to be doing here. I just went on to connect that side seam line straight. I also went on to take my length, which is 24 inches. So as you can see, I'm doing that to take my skirt length, which is 24 inches. And I also added 1 inch for folding allowance to it. So after doing that, I also went on to connect it, just like I said, you are repeating the same thing you did at the back to the front. So now at this point, the next thing I'm going to be doing now is to cut, and just cutting everything I'm going to be needing so that yes, we can work with this better. So in the same manner, I'm going to be creating a pencil effect. Now, instead of that 9 inches on my hip, I'm taking 2 out of the 9 inches. So I'm left with 7 inches. So this is going to help me create my pencil effect. I also went on to mark my hip, as you can see, and I connected that point down to that 7 inches on the extreme end. At this point, I was like, why am I really filming outside? It's because there is no power over here, and I don't want to delay this video at all. I've been giving excuses because of electricity lately. Okay, so I also went on to mark my seam allowance, sewing allowance, and I'm just going in with my scissors to trim out the excess I don't need. Yeah, the wind is really not helping, fam. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to mark my dart, as you can see. And once I'm done marking my dart, I just went to remove my pin, and yeah, my front pattern is okay. So now the next thing I'm going to be doing here is to cut my back pattern. So first thing I'm going to do is to take note of my wrong side, as you can see, and I'm just folding my fabric into two. And as you can see, this is my back pattern placed on this. I'm not doing anything different. I'm just adding 1.5 inches to the side seam because there is no seam allowance based on the pattern, and on the lower end I'm adding about 1 inches. So those are the two sides I'm going to be adding seam allowance. Okay, so after this, I just went on to cut every part. Every other part remained the same. Nothing is changing. And I went on to mark in my darts where my dart leg are and where my dart is supposed to stop. Also have to indicate my front, my back, my wrong side from my right side. So now to the front, this is where the work is, fam. Okay, the front, I have to trace my pattern out, my center front on my folded, yes, on my folded pattern. So yeah, I'm just adding 1 inch on the lower side, and I'm also adding 1.5 inch on the side seam, just like we did to the back pattern. Whatever you do to the back, you have to do it to the front too. So having done that, I also went on to curve my bust point. You can see that bust point. I had to curve that with my pattern master to avoid sharp edges. Now I'm just tracing. Remember that this is on fold, so I had to trace this part so I can have the same on the second part. Now after doing that, I also went on to cut out the excess I don't need, and after opening, you can see that crease. Now you might not be able to see my tracing wheel, what it traced out, but it's over there. So now the next thing I want to do is to determine my neckline. Remember, it's a neckline that has an overlap. So here I'm just trying to decide how I want the neck to be. So the first thing I had to do was to divide this shoulder into two. Measure what you have there and divide it into two by just folding in your tape. And after indicating that point, I had to come down, I think about 7 inches initially. Yes, I think I had to go down a bit. So I came down 7 inches initially because, of course, the style is a bit deep. You can do whatever you like. So I just indicated that point, and from the other end where my shoulder that is, I just created a line. I'm using my pen here just to be accurate before I finally use my marker. So I just created a slant line. As you can see what I'm doing. From that point, you can decide how high or how low you want it to be. But I think the more deeper it is, the more beautiful it looks. So I had to highlight this line properly. Then from the middle point, as you can see, that I indicated, I came down from that shoulder. So now I'll be able to create this like neckline. It's more like an asymmetric neckline, something like that. So I just had to highlight at this point with my marker so that you can see. So now the next thing I'm going to do was I folded this pattern paper into two, and what I want to do here is just to cut. This is because I want to cut out my dots. You can see I just had to trace my dot with my tracing wheel so that it can be obvious on the other part of the paper. So now I also went in with my ruler, my scissors rather, to be able to cut out my dots so that I can know where I'm going to. So this is just me after cutting my dart. This is how it looks, as you can see. Now opening, this is what it looks. Now the wind was really getting in my way, so I had to cut that part straight up, nothing attached, then the other part straight up. So I have my left and my right side. Okay, now this particular center front, just look at what the way I'm cutting this out. Now I'm still going to cut out this tiny piece, but first look at what I'm about to do. Remember that this is more like a princess cut, so I'm going to be joining. So at that particular point, I'm trying to note where this pattern stop, where, and that is why I'm marking, because I'll be cutting that side off, because remember I would be adding an overlap. So you can see I've cut that side out. Yes, I've cut that side out, and I've been able to mark out the parts of that shoulder. So now, as you can see, toward the shoulder and the armhole, I'll have to cut that part off. Why? Because we'll be joining this to the outfit later. Now, so after doing that, this is what I have. And at this point, I'm going to advise you to get your marker or your pencil ready to be able to label properly, because you will not be cutting this on fold. You are going to be cutting this directly. So this is my center front, that is my left side, my right side, and of course my shoulder. So this shoulder, I'll be going to be cutting it 2 times. Why? Because it's going to be sitting or resting on my body alone. So now this is just everything on my fabric, and I'm adding 0.5 inches round this pattern, except my side seam for the 2 sides. But for every other part, I added 0.5 inch. Now this other part, so I added 0.5 on the upper part. So as you can see, I'm just cutting this out, and yeah, we're almost there. So for the shoulders, I cut, like I told you, for the shoulder, I added 0.5 round, except the upper part where the shoulder seam is. So now to my sleeve block, as you can see, I taught you how to do this in one of my videos. Now remember that this sleeve is in 2 parts, so I'm going to be taking I'm going to be taking 5 inches away from the measurement, because that is where I'm going to be, that particular curve I'm going to be making use of another fabric. So I just indicated that, and remember that the sleeve has a bit of pleat, so I'm adding about 2.5 inches on the left and on the right side. Now this sleeve, I'm cutting the 2 pieces together, not on fold. Look at the back and the front together. Please check that video. I also added 1 inch for allowance, and I just connected the 2 points together. So now, very important, while you are cutting, is always necessary to indicate your back and your front sleeve block, so that you will know how you're going to be placing this when you are done, when you want to join to your fabric, to your outfit rather, or to your top or what have you. So I just went, I'm indicating with just 1 slash, that's my front, with 2 slash, that is my back. I did the same for the other sleeve, because I'm cutting these 2 sleeves together. My fabric is on fold. So as you can see, I have about 16 inches here in length. Now for the other fabric, this is how it is, and remember that 5 inches I took, I'm going to be cutting this now. Now I'm going to be cutting the 2 together on fold. As you can see, the lower part will not be having any joining seam because of the way I folded my fabric. You want to rewind and check that again. So I just added 1 inch seam allowance to the side, and if you notice this particular, I just added 1 inch for seam allowance. Okay, Now, I would advise you to use a stretchy fabric for this part. Mine was not stretchy, and when I was done sewing, I guess it was a little bit tight. It was not really tight, but then I felt using a stretchy fabric would be better. So as you can see, this is what I'm trying to achieve for the curve. Okay, so I already have my two piece ready. Now for the overlap, I eventually had little fabric. So just look at the way I placed this because of my fabric was not much. So this is on fold, please. So as you can see, I have, then I just determine the shape you want. So if you want a V, this is it. If you want another shape, you can decide to do another shape. So I just decided to make the shape based on what the video gave to me. Yeah, and that's it. That's all about the cut. In my next video, I'm going to be showing you how to sew this and the final look on my body. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for watching.